bring up here. He is the lead college football analyst at Mojo, and he is the host of the College to Canton podcast. He is Travis May. Travis, man, welcome to the Draft Countdown podcast.
Hey, glad to be here, guys. Always good to talk to my good buddy Shane. And Brian, I'm not sure we've actually been on a podcast before, have we?
I do not think we have. So it's good to meet you, sir. And I think my first question that I have, matter of fact, it's the only one that I have written down. I told Shane he was going to have to take the lead on this stuff tonight. But for people like me who are completely clueless here, what is Mojo and what does it do for people like me who are ignorant of the subject?
That's a great question because not many people are privy to Mojo like nationwide or worldwide just yet, because we've only actually been live anywhere at all since September of last year. But we are essentially the first fully regulated sports stock market / sports book type entity. So we are both regulated via, kind of a financial institution and sports book together. And so that makes things complicated for us, but great for, the user, because that means we can offer an environment that really feels like and acts like a real stock market. But also it means we can offer, kind of single game binary kind of bet type offerings as well. We launched with the NFL last year, and initially we just had these stocks that were career-long bets. And so essentially, like players like, your Patrick Mahomes of the world, they're way over $100 per share. But, the back of the roster players who are not even doing much at all from a week-to-week production basis, they might be $1 or even less in some cases. So there's quite, just like the real stock market, there's quite a range of type of players and assets that you can potentially invest in. And it's not like, a company, you're trying to bet on a future revenue and production, from a dollars and cents standpoint. It's based on real live NFL stats or whatever sport it is stats. And there's a key, objective formula, stats formula that's on our website and in the app and in the explanations, where you can kind of see, okay, this is how all the stats and all the value within the stock is accrued. And so every single player has to their name, in the pros anyway, like part of their stock price that is their banked or accrued Mojo value. And then a portion of it is the future expected or projected portion of their price. And the idea is that you can go long or short betting for or against a player at any given price point. And, if a player does worse or a player does well, you can make some money in either direction. And so it's a lot of fun, because it is like a sports stock market. It really is. And it's not just career bets with the launch of NBA and even some college basketball stuff with March Madness. We've added some like single game type stocks that are essentially function, if you're familiar with like how, options work on the stock market, like call options or put options, where you're betting for or against on a very short-term window, an outcome of an entire team or a specific player. Like within basketball, you could have, essentially a bet or a stock on a basketball player's assists for a game or points for a game. Or in the tournament, it was like total points in the tournament and so on and so forth. So it was really fun just to see people just love that. And the fun part is like the cash outs and the cash out options are actually fair and you can enter and exit at any time. It's not like a just straight up binary, did I win or did I lose? Like throughout every single game and throughout the off season and every bit of news that comes out, you'll see prices fluctuate. And so you can enter and exit at any given price point. It's up to you. So it's a lot of fun just overseeing specifically what I've been doing is the college portion and NFL draft prospect stuff. So that's the overview, but Mojo is going to be a blast when it's available everywhere. It's right now you have to be in New Jersey to play, to participate, to trade. But we're in process of adding several more states.
Well, Travis, you and I cut it up in the fantasy realm. So, Brian, not much of a fantasy football player as well.
No.
So we'll have to give him some credit. But, so you do a lot of analytical analysis there, plus the
Yes.
stock market with Mojo. So I think I'm just going to jump to maybe one of the most controversial prospects in this draft. And I want you to talk about him from both kind of perspectives. That's Anthony Richardson, the quarterback from Florida. Basically, how was his prospect at NFL success from an analytical perspective? And then tell me about the stock on Mojo through this process, as Richardson's been through the college season, his first full season starting, and now the off season, kind of a roller coaster. So I'm interested to hear about that too.
Yeah, it's interesting because like my background initially was all fantasy football, kind of shifted to more real football and building some nerdy predictive modeling for a couple of different sites, covering a few different teams. So I kind of have this a weird set of experiences where it's fantasy football, it's real college football, it's real NFL, and now I'm doing the sports stock market stuff. And so, but I think the sports stock market thing has really informed how I think about things through a fantasy football lens and a real football lens, because I get to see everyone's confidence or lack thereof in certain prospects. And Richardson's just been all over the place. But there have been a lot of people who have been extremely confident in him. And because of that, his price since last fall has risen like 300+% since I believe his declare date, which is just absolutely bonkers to see that meteoric rise. And that can be reflected all over Twitter, all over mock drafts. After the combine, he jumped all the way up to like plus 300 something to be the first overall selection in the NFL draft. So his stock has been incredibly high. But what's been confusing to me is that there is that much of confidence from so many people, considering from an analytical perspective, there's literally never in the modern history of the NFL been a successful player with such a poor passing profile ever. Not even remotely close. Like all the comps that people throw out, like, oh, well, Lamar Jackson was this or Jalen Hurts was that. You could cut their like pass efficiency percentile in half and they would still destroy Anthony Richardson's trash profile. And so that's probably putting it nicely, by the way. And so there's so many questions. I see the upside. I see the athleticism. If he does succeed, it's because he's the best athlete to ever play the position, perhaps. At least the top 3 athlete at the position ever. But man, the amount of confidence that all the mock drafts and experts have in this player who's literally never done a freaking good thing throughout the entirety of one full game is just wild to me. So yeah, I mean, he could absolutely pan out because of the tools, and there are flashes of incredible runs against LSU, out routes that he just nails effortlessly on his first read. And there are moments where you think, oh gosh, he completely just nailed it. Like in between 3 defenders over the middle, leaping catch. It was fantastic. But there's so many quarterbacks that have those moments. He just had so few of them. And he's got such a short resume of less than fewer than 400 total pass attempts to his name in college. He's an absolute wild card that people are just acting like, oh, obviously he's the 4th overall selection to the Colts. Just sign off and that's it. And that's just bonkers.
Number 99 overall on my board.
There you go. Hey, we got a sane person. Sweet. that makes at least one more of us.
I'm curious what the stock value is of quarterbacks who couldn't beat Vanderbilt in college. Just saying. But that's a running joke now on the Draft Countdown podcast. We don't need to get into.
Oh, man.
I thought of a question here while you were talking, and I wrote it down. At this point in the NFL, the position of running back is devalued, right? I mean, if you give a running back a second contract, you pretty much committed salary cap suicide, right? If you're a team, or so it seems to be heading that way. So does Mojo like are you buying, like if you're buying a running back stock at this point, and you can't really play the long game with that, right? Because it's only like for 4 years. So essentially, is that something that is this positional value, I guess, is where I'm getting here, something that is taken to effect with Mojo?
Absolutely. So I mean, the scale of and ceiling in terms of like expected price for all the positions are very well. They're just vastly different across the board. Like tight ends struggle to have like you're not going to see any tight end have a $100 price tag, even if it's Travis Kelce. It's like not even half that. It won't ever reach. Like there's never going to be a tight end that eclipses like $50 in Mojo value because it's. If I were to explain how the stats are accrued, the model is similar to like the the modern expected points added kind of calculation. Taking into effect yards and first downs and there's an efficiency aspect to it, but it doesn't overweight rushing or receiving yards like fantasy does. So the guys that just accumulate a ton of yards like quarterbacks tend to have the higher price tags available to them. So like first round quarterbacks, they're in like anywhere from like the back end of a first round pick, $18 to $20 range up to like closer to $50 if you're like a Trevor Lawrence type prospect. Like Lawrence, I think IPO'd above $45, which is about the highest we've seen on the platform. But like running backs, you're even like a round 2 running back, you're not even going to be IPOing over $10, So yeah, it is definitely scaled by position, and there's a lot of value to be had still. Just like the real stock market, because it's all about the percentile increase. And it's not necessarily about the dollars or the scale of the stock. It's about the percentile gained. But even like the guys who've been around for a while, they're not dead because they're like, depending on how long they've been in the league and depending on how much expected future value you have on a player, there's going to be a higher multiplier available. So like an older player might have a multiplier of like 10x available. Like if player X's stock goes up 1% and you have a 10x multiplier on it, it goes up 10% instead of 1%. So there are fun ways to amplify the volatility.
So, kind of leading into that, how does that affect a player like Bijan Robinson, who is expected first round pick? I also want to get your opinion how high you think he can go, because that debate is very interesting to me. Is going to come in as probably one of the best running backs in the NFL. Is it a situation where his value can continue to rise? And to you, Travis, how high do you think he's going to go in the NFL draft?
Yeah, this is kind of reshaped how I think of things in terms of like comparing prospects from a real football perspective, and like projecting out how long their career will be, as well as like through a dynasty lens. Because guys like Breece Hall, who have proven it on a small sample, had decent capital, and in many circles have been at some point, in the running back 1 overall conversation for fantasy purposes. And largely last year, where he was the consensus running back 1, Bijan actually, his initial IPO price was almost identical to Breece Hall's current price. Like they're both just over $13. But the initial buy action on Bijan suggested that there was quite a bit of confidence that he would be a better player than Breece Hall, which is funny because like that's what the real NFL sentiment is. And that's what, in many circles, I think most circles, that's what the sentiment is surrounding those two, even in fantasy as well. And so he's coming in at a range of, he's basically expected to be a mid first rounder, or at least have a career like a mid first rounder would. And so it's just fun because we might IPO at a certain price, but the collective mind of the wisdom of the crowd and how they really put their money where their mouth is in this market space really speaks to a collective perception of every single player, which is so much fun. So Bijan right now, his price right now is not even half of what guys like LaDainian Tomlinson ended up producing. But it would be insane to project that kind of outcome for any prospect, even if you just can't know that someone's going to produce at that kind of level. But it will be interesting because there's definitely room to grow. If he becomes one of the most productive backs in recent memory, if he becomes like a productive guy, like on the level of Ezekiel Elliott, Zeke's actually produced over $20 like of banked value already. So there's plenty of room to go up and perhaps even double or beyond.
Who are some of the skill position players? We'll just say running backs and wide receivers here that you've looked at so far in this draft class that you could say buy low right now because you think that their stock's going to go through. For the sake of this, we'll say buy low stocks, but we all talk about sleepers, right? So it's
Sure.
who are some running backs and receivers in this class that you could like say, hey, let's get them now before it gets hot.
Yeah, I don't. What's funny about my position is I'm not even technically allowed to give advice as explicit at that. But I will say there are some, just based on what I've seen in early activity. There's some confidence in guys like Zay Flowers. There's been rising confidence in mock drafts here recently, but I think a lot more people are coming around to the fact that holy cow, this guy, he should probably perhaps even be in the wide receiver 1 conversation. Analytically speaking, in terms of like the production metrics that nerds like me appreciate, he's not necessarily perfect. He doesn't have the great peak to his profile per se, but he has 3 years of consistent production, and he's got 2 seasons under his belt that's where he actually scored more receiving touchdowns than anyone else in the ACC, which is a little rare for a guy of his size and his archetype at the wide receiver position. And he tested more athletic than I think a lot of people thought he was. And so we had a kind of early VIP release with our market last week before all the players went live to the entirety of anyone on Mojo this week. And Zay Flowers was the most traded player. And so that was interesting to see that amount of confidence in a player who, until just recently, wasn't expected necessarily to be a kind of first round selection. So that's somebody that's definitely been intriguing. But even just today, like there's been a lot more interest in Cedric Tillman. There's been a lot more interest in, like Trey Palmer. He's just an incredible vertical threat. He might have hands issues from time to time, but man, like when you come in at the combine and you're the fastest guy there at the wide receiver position, that's going to turn some heads faster than, the wheels of Jalen Hyatt, which a lot of people thought he would be the fastest guy. So I think people are buying in and believing in very different kinds of players. I mean, like his 3 different, Zay is more of like, a lot of people think he's going to be a flex. I think he's a slot. I think he's more than that. But Tillman's like a player who would have probably gone around 10 years ago. And because he's a big bodied X type who wins at the catch point. And then you got the straight line speed of Palmer. So there's all sorts of players in this class. A lot of small ones in this class, but those are just a few names that I know that the market has been interested in here recently. So we'll see if that continues. But running back, I think a lot of people are coming around on Chase Brown after his stellar combine performance, and that hasn't stopped since he actually kind of tested out as a really, really plus impressive athlete. So I don't think that's going anywhere. And I think a lot of people are also believing in Jahmyr Gibbs, of course. But if we're looking for a sleeper, I think a lot of people also might be interested in Dwayne McBride out of UAB. He didn't do all the testing at the combine, but he's somebody in terms of a big enough body to take a significant workload. He's somebody I'm paying attention to immensely because there's a lot of interest in him as well. I'm not sure how much capital he gets, but even if he just gets an opportunity to have some 1B level touches, that's a name that I'm definitely keeping an eye on.
So Travis, how do mock drafts essentially end up affecting the price, especially when we're talking about the NFL draft? I have to imagine there's some influence, right? Especially when the big names come out, or we start to see players, right, start creeping up the board and like guys that weren't expected. I know you definitely track that stuff a lot. How does kind of the I was like, probably way too much. You've seen way too many mock drafts. How does kind of the media mock draft affect what people do on Mojo, or what those prices look like, since we're in this period you can't accrue any stats?
Yeah, it's hard to weigh because that is one piece of the puzzle that we are constantly analyzing at Mojo in terms of how we would actually move the price on ourselves, regardless of any buying or selling action that's taking place. But when those big mock drafts do come out, that generally prompts some action. And so we're careful to not double count and overdo things with the price, but we do have to objectively listen to the market and move price on new bits of information, as well as the buying and selling action. It's really threefold. I mean, like any actual market, it's actual, like an actual stock or an actual company. It would be like actual performance, relevant news that comes out, And third, the buying and selling of any action surrounding player. And that's kind of how like dynasty fantasy football markets and values work, and like how a lot of the algorithms that affect like the trade calculators work. It's a constantly moving process. But yeah, the mock drafts do play a big part of it because they carry weight, especially this time of year. Just a peek a little bit behind the curtain. We have found that, you know, the impact or stickiness of mock drafting that takes place before the NFL Combine is pretty useless, like absolutely like hot garbage useless. So like if you're copying and pasting somebody's mock from, I'm not saying writing them before is useless. I'm saying that like in terms of actual predictive value, they players start to change and solidify like where they're actually going to go after that point. But prior to, like, even large scale data shifts massively. So if you're copying and pasting mock drafts from, you know, November or January that still for some drunk reason had Tanner McKee going even in day 2, you're gonna look real dumb real soon. So it's just funny to see how that moves and when it's useful versus when it's not for our purposes.
Me and you seem to be on the same page with these quarterbacks. So just quickly, is Will Levis hot garbage too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he's not like in terms of a passer as much of a problem just as Anthony Richardson is, like, you know, having very little positive to go off of there. You know, depending on how you adjust anyone's like analytical profile. Let's just talk that through, because I want to get your take on that too. But like, so 2021, he comes into Kentucky. He's got an NFL level offensive coordinator, better offensive line than he had in 2022. It's just a great situation for him to thrive in. He's got like a legit wide receiver 1 in Wan'Dale Robinson, so he does good enough, right? Like it's not wild, but like, you know, he's a 60th, 70th ish, maybe if you squint, percentile pass efficiency guy. And then last year he struggled with health, and so he was imperfect. His decision making was questionable. He had a much worse offensive coordinator. He had much worse offensive line play. So the schematic effect on his profile weighed him down, and just from a raw numbers perspective. But if you get into the nitty gritty and adjust for all the external variables, including like play calling and play action percentage, jet motion percentage, his average depth of target, and look at things through like a few different lenses, like his completion percentage over expected, his adjusted yards per attempt over expected, and several other nerdy stats. Last year was actually more impressive because of all the external baggage surrounding him than 2021 is. So if you squint and say, man, 2021, he was gifted this perfection. 2022, he struggled on paper, but at the same time, he overcame things to it was almost impressive to me. But at the same time, that doesn't mean he should be a top 10 pick. You know, like, he is an early day 2 level prospect with nice biceps, you know, so that's where I land. But I'm interested just to see how you guys process the difference between 2021 and 2022, and to either one of those peaks really make him, you know, for early first round prospect, because neither season does, and the collective profile together just falls short.
I'll go quickly because Shane can elaborate a lot more than I can. But even with 2021, there was a lot of holes in his profile to me, even with what all you said. And you're right. I mean, he did have a lot working against him, had the injury, the poor coordinator, the no real number 1 wide receiver this year at Kentucky. So you don't want to hold 2022 completely against him. But like I said, even if you go back and watch his tape 2021, I don't think he was a top 10 prospect coming into this class. Like, you know, he was on some people's boards. I've got a 3rd round grade on him right now, early 3rd round grade. So I'm not convinced he's that either. And he also lost to Vanderbilt.
He did.
Both him and Anthony Richardson. So I'm not quite as low as Brian. I mean, I have both Levis and Anthony Richardson as round 2 prospects. You know, I thought 2021, and you mentioned Travis, having the NFL offensive coordinator running an NFL offense, I think was like, oh, you know, you can see the translation pretty easily. I think that's what teams liked. And then when things didn't go so well this year, now does he need everything to be successful? I think he needs the exact right situation, almost Mac Jones on steroids. Like you need the right thing for that to work.
That's interesting. I feel like we're kind of on the same page there. Yeah, to me, it's like round 2-ish, but I get that everyone, if they think that there's any chance they could be the guy, they have to reach into early round 1, but it just feels so wrong.
We do have Brad Menendez, draft countdown writer. Brad, Travis, and I are in a fantasy league together. So commenting, Travis hasn't brought out any charts. I thought you'd share the screen and bring out the charts, Travis.
Yeah, I mean, I could if you just let me take over the screen here. Yeah, get some of those for Brad and all of our pinnacle of Devi league mates. We are 2,000 rounds into our Devi draft, by the way. So
2,000. Yeah. What? And someone took Travis's son. So.
Or 2,000 picks, rather. So
yeah, 2,000.
Oh yeah,
picks.
yeah. Dwight, shout out Dwight if he's listening. I was on his show this week too. Dwight drafted my son, who is 16 months old.
So you never know. You got to get him early, Brian. You sure you don't want to be in these fantasy leagues, Brian? It's a blast.
Yeah.
For since you don't know, I'm partners at Draft Countdown with Shane, who's like in 712 fantasy leagues of different kinds. I'm in one. With 9 other people at my work, and that's it. Last question for me, and I'll give Shane one more question. We'll let you go. In this regards to your college to Canton podcast and stuff of this nature, Mojo, and this question gets asked a lot involving college football. Do stars matter?
Oh man, I'm gonna need another podcast to just break down that.
Let's give me the Cliff Notes.
Okay, Cliff Note answer is yes. Roll credits. If it's like seriously, like immensely so, and more now than they ever have. In fact, like when we first started tracking stars in the early 2000s, they were absolute garbage. All the services were terrible. They had awful sources. Like if you ever like looked at film, like any kind of production via video from the year 2000 and thought, there's no way it looked that bad. Like it was just the resources that we had to make the right decisions in terms of scouting were just zilch. And so the hit rate was atrocious. Like even like 5-star level prospects were getting drafted at like a 50% clip or less in some classes. Fast forward to the most recently, expressed or drafted, fully matured recruiting classes, like from 2013 to 2017. Almost 100% of players from 2017 have been drafted at this point, even the extra COVID eligibility guys. And so like 2013 to 2017, the hit rate for, top level 5 stars went from below 50% in the early 2000s to 70% of those players get drafted now, which is just bonkers. Like almost doubling the hit rate from the previous early decade. And it's wild. Like a quarter of all 5 stars get first round capital at this point, regardless of position. And it's only accelerating. So the services are getting a lot better at identifying pro level traits from an earlier age. I mean, like we can basically safely project like 16, 17-year-olds that like, yeah, that player's getting drafted. I don't know where, but he's getting drafted pretty certainly, unless something goes off the ledge, or just people get in trouble, or they have mental health issues. Real stuff happens, but for the most part, the hit rate is becoming ridiculous. So in terms of like top tier 5 stars, we're reaching a point like this year, especially, where we're going to see a ridiculous number of guys with absurd pedigree just littered across the first round. Like over the course of the like last 20 years or so, like only a quarter or so of round 1 you might see be like true 5 stars, another quarter maybe a little bit more 4 stars, and actually more 3 stars than 4 or 5 getting drafted. But that's because there are like 40 times the amount of 3 stars as there are like 5 stars, and there's like 4 or 5 times the amount of 3 stars as there are 4 stars. And so when people want to say, well, what about Cooper Kupp? Well, what about so-and-so? Like, cool, you're right. They are the exception to the rule. Like, in every single draft class, there's like 250,000 kids all competing for the same star ratings. There's, between all the services, like 45 stars, 404 stars, 2,000 3 stars. And then the rest of the, 248,000 kids that are 2 stars and below, like they're all competing. And out of those 248,000 kids that didn't get a 3-star rating or better, maybe 5 or 6 will get first round capital. So like the expected hit rate is a little bit different. So stars absolutely matter from both a team building perspective and draft capital projection perspective. It's wild how accurate the services are becoming.
It's great info, and I love listening to your podcast. Back and when we broke those down was awesome. My last question, then we'll let you go, Travis. Real quick, just give us, whether it be the Mojo stocks or some of your interjections, top 3 or 4 college players, right now in terms of Mojo price, and that obviously looking to have a high first round picks next year or beyond.
Well, the number one, the obvious, I'm just so stupid high personally on Caleb Williams. I've wanted my Titans to just go 0-17, please. Like don't even posture like you care about winning, please. Do not. And he's currently priced at like $37, which is a little bit cheaper than Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, but it's still actually more expensive than Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, because he's just the lockiest lock of locks, to go a first round next year. It's one of those situations where he could just sit out. He would have been the first overall pick this year. He could just pull Jamar Chase and be like, nah, I'm good. I'm just going to, root my teammates on, but I'm going to go first overall next year. And so that's just an intriguing play because I just want to see his career play out. He could maybe fail, but it sure seems like that's impossible. So he's one that I'm interested in. Drake May seems to be the consensus quarterback too, and yet he's actually $21 right now and rising, $21 and change. And so he's actually cheaper than Will Levis. So that's been interesting to track. I mean, there have been people interested in him, but maybe because he's a year out, people are just less interested in that. But beyond that, Quinn Ewers has been all over the place because people don't know what to do with Arch Manning coming in. But he's actually below $15 now for the first time, I believe, ever since he's been on the platform since last fall, because people are thinking, hey, Arch Manning could take over. So, there's still upside with Ewers. Like the version of Ewers that we saw against with the first half of Alabama before he went down with injury last year, that was like a first round kind of quarterback. So if we see that player again and Arch Manning stays on the bench and is redshirted effectively this year, that could be really fun too. So those 3 are super fun right now, but there's several other guys that are under $10, like Jordan Travis, who's still, I think, top 5 or 6 to be, in the Heisman conversation for this year. Michael Penix, who absolutely just balled last year for Washington. I know if he can stay healthy for one more year, that's a bet in and of itself, but he's under $10 too. So lots of guys like that on the platform, and several more to be added shortly after the NFL draft at several other positions like running back, wide receiver, and tight end here soon. My hope is that by the fall, we have 300 plus college players on the platform all ready to go. So that's the goal, but there's plenty of players to be excited about moving forward for next year. Looking like a pretty stacked class, a fun class.
Yeah, Shane's already released 17, 20, 24 mock drafts already.
At least,
right? They're like 12. Come on.
If you go to mock draft database, there's Shane and nobody else. It's crazy, especially for 2025.
Oh,
he's the only ones of it's wild.
Hey, my buddy Stefan, I think he's he actually just asked me to look over some stuff for one he's going to be having it coming out, I believe, at RotoViz here soon. So you'll have some competition.
All right, yeah. Let's
so I'll tell Stefan to hurry that up.
Wow. Travis, man, it's great to meet you, and great to learn about some of this stuff, even if it's something. Well, one, I live in Alabama, I can't legally gamble anywhere, but it's great to learn about this stuff and great to figure this stuff out. And Shane's talked you up to me and off chat, and it was great to hear all this information. I'm so glad you joined us tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys invited me and had me on. And it is. I mean, even if you're not in the state, you can download the app wherever and look at the prices wherever. We had Nick Ercolano, who is what the big dogs got to eat. They had that NFT kind of big launch last year. It was a huge event for fantasy football purposes. And he actually just made a 20-minute video just breaking down some of our pricing and just using it to help him with dynasty fantasy football. And so it was amazing just to see how it could be applied just from a nerdy numbers perspective, just because it adds another layer to your game, another set of data to help you out. And I'm all for finding as many assets as I can. It doesn't cost anything to just download and check it out and look at the prices move and see what the real stock market of players values a certain player as.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah, but I appreciate it. I'll leave you guys be so you guys can talk about Shane 2027 NFL mock draft. But you guys take care, and I'll talk soon, Shane.
No, thanks, Travis. Yeah,
Nice to
thanks
meet
for
you,
coming on,
Brian.
man. It was great.
That was Travis May of Mojo. Good stuff there, man.
Different, unique, which I think is always exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different take on stuff that we don't normally talk about in a way that we normally do. So it's a good to get that perspective out there as it is. But Travis